Hi everyone, let's continue with our interior design. First of all, let's go for our door. So let's just press the P key and then the Z key just to make a zoom to our door. Now this door, I think it's better if we just leave it as a white color. So let's go for the material editor. Now let's grab a Corona physical material and we're going to go with a very easy setting. Let's turn this material to the metal and let's apply this simple color to our door and make a test render. So let's select all the elements from the door and let's right click and assign material to selection. Now the door handle, I think it will be a good idea to leave it with a black color. So I'm just going to clone this Corona physical material by holding my shift key. And in the color, let's just make it a little bit darker by lowering its value. Let's hit OK and now let's apply this color to the door handle. Now, because we're applying metal materials, we don't really have to map them. Now, one thing that we can't forget is to add these two objects into our exclusions from our material override. So let's go ahead and start our interactive render to see how this looks. Let's apply a region. Okay, so it actually doesn't look bad at all. Let's go ahead and work on our window frames. Let's go back to our camera by pressing the C key and let's grab these window frames. Now if you're having difficulty to select the window frame, just go into a wireframe mode and grab the window frames like so. Alright, so to avoid having so many different colors, I'm going to use the same color as my door handle and assign material to selection again. Now let's go ahead and see how everything is doing. So I start interactive. And I'm actually going to disable my region by holding my left click and disable all. I obviously have to add these elements to my exclusions from my material override. So I'm just going to add them like so. Alright, so now that all of our objects are inside our excluded list, we can just start the interactive render. Okay, so everything seems to be doing really good. So now it's time to disable all of our material override because we've done creating all of the materials that were not part of our furniture. So let's go ahead and deselect the material override. And now let's start the interactive rendering. Alright, so we have many funny colors going on because of our furniture. So we have to fix this. Now one thing that you have to keep in mind that having this different colors inside of our rendering, it's just going to look a bit weird as you can see. So let's go ahead and fix this. Let's open our material editor and let's create a new tab. I'm going to name it furniture. And let's hit OK. Alright, so by using the Corona color correct, we're going to be fixing all of these colors that seem a little bit off. So how can we get the materials from this furniture here? For this, we have this eyedropper icon, which says pick material from object. So I'm just going to select this and let's start with our bed. I'm just going to click once in the bed and it's going to give me this multi-sub object, which has all of the materials that come with this specific furniture. And if you see over here in the material ID, number 2 and 3 are the ones that are controlling these funny colors here from the pillows and also from the quilt. So let's go down here and we can see this one that's actually the pillows. So let's add a Corona color correct. Like so. And now what I want to do is just to get rid of this color that it's really not blending in very well with my interior design. So I'm just going to turn it a little bit darker. So to do this, first of all, I want to use my saturation. So I'm going to go all the way to -1 so that it turns to this grayish color. And also I think this is way too bright. So I'm going to turn the gamma down a little bit. So let's go for 0.5 and I'm going to create a region just for my pillows here and start my interactive render. Okay, this looks much better. Now let's go for our quilt over here. So let's go down here to find this bluish color and I'm going to also add a Corona color correct. And again, I'm going to lower its saturation to -1 and also its gamma to probably 0.4. And finally, let's just try 0.2. I think this is better because I don't want it to be that bright because it might create some contrast and the viewer may focus on the bed instead of the interior design. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Okay, so let's disable everything. You see that just by doing that, we get a better visual. Now I'm going to head over to my study area because this material it's a bit too bright, and also you can see that our pictures are in the wrong direction. We're going to be fixing that in a moment. Now I'm going to just grab all of these multi-sub materials and I'm going to drag it over here, and I'm going to use my eyedropper just to pick this board like so, and I don't really want to overlap any of this material, so I'm just going to bring the whole thing a little bit downwards. So I can do this by right clicking, go into my select option and select the tree. So the tree just means that I'm going to select the whole composition here. I was selecting this one, so I'm just going to bring it back. Okay, so here is the material that we need to fix. I'm just going to bring in another Corona Color Correct again. Alright, so let's just reduce the saturation for a bit. So negative 0.5 maybe. Actually, that's way too much. Negative 0.2 will do the trick. And I also want to make this a little bit darker. So 0.8 in gamma. And there we go. You can see that it's actually blending in a little bit with the wall, which is perfect because I don't want to make a contrast out of this board. Okay, so another object which is really bothering me is this set of books over here. So again, I'm just going to select them and I'm going to close this, and let's bring everything up here. Let's go for our eyedropper again and select this books. Now you can see that all of them really have some strong colors. So I will create a Corona Color Correct for everyone, like so, and I'm going to reduce its saturation to -1 so that we have a black and white set of books. Now I can just clone this by holding my Shift key and just doing the same thing for all of the books, like so that they don't drag so much attention. Okay, this might be a little bit time consuming, but it's going to be worth it just to keep everything in the same tones. We don't want to drag attention where it's not necessary, and this one is actually with a saturation already. So the books that already have a very mute color, we don't really need to add this Corona Color Correct here. So let's just save some time there. Make sure that you're actually plugging in. We're good to go. Let's just check all of these books over here. So start interactive, and let's go for a region over here. Alright, so that's actually looking fine. Now let's go for the lamp here because this tone is a little bit too bright. So now let's go to another part of our slate material. Let's pick our eyedropper icon and drop it here. Alright, now you can see the problem here, so I'm just going to double click, and then this time we don't have any base color. The base color is actually inside of our base layer, so I'm just going to pick this color here. In its saturation, I'm just going to drag it over here, and also in its value, let's just bring it all the way down here. Now one fun thing that we could do is just use this eyedropper from the base color, and we can just tell it to have the same color as the wall, and it's going to automatically grab it like so. So that's a very efficient way to do this. Now I'm going to start my interactive render again, and I'm going to choose the region. Now notice that our brick actually have some gray spots here. Okay, so it's not really grabbing it. The gray is too pronounced on our wall here. So let's go back. Let's actually increase this like so. Okay, something around these tones. Now it's time to flip our pictures here. So let's stop our interactive render and head over to our pictures. Now with my E key, and make sure that you have your snaps on for your angle, I'm just going to rotate this like so. And just before rotating it, you can see that these colors are going to be not so good for our composition here, but we're going to be fixing that too. There we go. Now let's grab this one because this picture is actually good for us. It's not doing any contrast. Okay, so let's go to this side here. Pick our eyedropper and put it in our picture there. Okay, let's not overlap any of these. So right click and select tree, and let's move everything over here. All right, so again, I'm just going to bring in a Corona color correct. Okay. And now I'm just going to reduce its saturation to -1, and that's about it. I think we're good to go like that. Alright, so we've fixed all of the colors from our furniture, and you can see how simple it is. Just by using the Corona Color Correct plus the eyedropper, we can fix everything very quick. And we will be talking about imports further into the course. Let's just finish this interior design first. So let's go to Start Interactive again. This time I'm going to disable all of my regions. Alright, so one thing that I'm noticing, it's the curtains. They're letting too much light in. So let's fix them by bringing them to our material editor here. Okay, so again with the same method, I'm going to just pick them like so, and the curtains are right down here. So let's select the curtains, and we will need the help of the interactive render just to see what's going on with them. And let's just bring in some region, and I'm actually going to delete these ones. I only want to see their curtains right now. Alright, so first of all, the glossiness. This is actually an inverted type of roughness. Okay, so remember that in roughness, the higher the value, the less smooth it would be, or the less reflective our material would be. So by using glossiness, it's the other way around. You can actually toggle between the glossiness and roughness by scrolling down to the advanced settings inside the Corona physical material. However, the glossiness was used before the Corona physical material was created. So I wouldn't suggest you to change this parameter, because throughout the course we'll be using only the roughness, which is actually an upgrade. So we don't want to go a step back, we actually want to stay updated. So let's lower the glossiness to reduce its reflectiveness, like so. Okay, so I'm just going to type in a 0.1 to glossiness. Okay, so that helped a bit. We can also change the index of refraction. Let's go for 1.5. That helped a lot too. So if we go for a higher value of refraction, I think this looks a little bit better. Let's go for a 1.6 maybe. Curtains are looking a little bit better. Let's check these ones over here. Because this one was actually another type of 3D model that we brought in, it's not actually changing. I think we can stay with these. Alright, now let's just render this for a bit for us to go to the next step. Okay, so now it's time to introduce you to tone mapping. If you can't see it, again, you can go to the tools options and just toggle it. Now the tone mapping works as a post-production tool. There's no need to go into Photoshop to do some post-production of our image. We have it right here in Corona Renderer. Now I'm not saying that it's not necessary to go to Photoshop just to do some final adjustments, but for now, let's just do it with the tone mapping. And it's going to make a really big difference. So let's see what it has. First of all, we have the simple exposure. Now the exposure is just going to make our scene a little bit brighter by using the lights that we've already put into it, like our Corona sky, for example. So right now my image is a little bit too dark, so I can just bring this up. Let's leave it at around 0.8. Okay, now the white balance will control the temperature of my scene. So if I go a little bit higher, I can see that I take a more warmer look. So I think it would be okay to leave this at 7500. And just before we continue, let's just have a look at our reference image. Okay, so we see that our reference actually has a little bit of a warmer look. And also the light is a bit stronger. So let's go back to our render. And actually, I think it will be better if we go to our Corona sky to give a little bit more exposure to our rendering. So let's go to the sky tab here, and let's go into our Corona sky, and in our intensity, let's just leave it at 1. And in our simple exposure within our tone mapping, because we just increased it in our Corona sky, let's just leave it at 0 for the moment. So let's try this interactive render again. Okay, I think we can go a little bit further to 1.2. Before we continue, I'd like to show you what the stats tab does. So in here, the thing that matters, it's down here in performance. Here we can see that the render passes have gone all the way to 44 and the noise level is at 5%. Now just to have a good look of how our render is doing, we can leave it at 8% at noise level. For now, I have it at 5.5% so that you can see better what we're going to be doing in our post-production tab. So make sure that once you're done with all your textures and all your color corrections to your furniture, to leave this at around 8%. In other words, you have to leave your interactive render to keep going until your noise level gets to 8%. So let's go back to our post tab, and in here we can even go a little bit higher with our warm look, something like so. So let's go back to our reference. So yes, we're doing pretty good. Let's leave it at 8000 for the moment because afterwards we're going to make it a bit warmer. So here we have the green magenta, and it's basically just going to grab our green and magenta colors. So I'm just going to leave it at 0 for the moment. Now the contrast is something that I usually like to leave at around 3. It really makes a difference having a contrast. Now, if you go a little bit higher, the scene will just burn out. So I suggest you to leave it at around 2 to 3. I think it looks very nice like this. So the saturation is something that I really don't use that often because I don't like to lose the colors of my render. However, if I do use it, I use a value of around negative 0.03 or 0.05. So in between those values would be fine. Because if I go for 0.1 for instance, it's just going to get rid of all my colors. I really don't like this look, but it really depends on the type of client that you're working with. So 0.05 might be the maximum that I would use. Now this next setting, I really don't use it at all because it would just burn my image, and maybe you can just reduce its amount a little bit, but it really doesn't make that much of a difference. And I prefer just to add an LUT, which we're going to see in a moment. Now, one thing that we can notice is that in some parts of our image, we can see that the light is way too strong, so it's kind of burning a little bit my wooden floor in this case. So to get rid of that, we can use a highlight compression. So if we go to this positive icon, we see many more options here. So let's go down here where it says highlight control, and let's just select this option. So if I increase this, it's going to compress my highlights. So all of the burned parts or all of the burnt spots are going to be a little bit smoother. So let's go for a 1.5 around. And if you have to go for values of more than 5, it means that your corona sky or any lighting that you're using inside your interior are way too high. So try and reducing those levels, because we shouldn't rely on this highlight compression just to help us out with the burning of our image. So let's go again to our positive icon, and let's now go to a vignette. And we can use this vignette just to focus more our view into our interior design here. So it's going to basically darken our border from our image. So let's go ahead and use a maximum of 1. It's going to be okay. So this is getting to look a lot nicer just with the post-production here in Corona Renderer. And finally, down here we have the final look. So we can use this LUT. So the LUT is basically going to add an effect. So let's just select it like so. And if we bring this down here, we can actually set it to reduce this effect. So around 0.7 will be fine. And we actually have many more here, but the first one is actually that makes the scene a little bit warmer. So for instance, if I go over here, it's going to bring all of my green or my magenta up a little bit. So you can try out all of these effects here. I'm going to go for the first one because it suits my scene very well. Now down here I have the bloom and glare. Now my bloom and glare will give this typical effect to my lights, and you can actually control the intensity and the size of this type of effect. So if I just reduce the bloom intensity, because this light up here looks like a very little sun there, so I'm just going to reduce its effect to 0. And the threshold, if I just increase it, it's actually going to reduce that effect as well. It's just going to hold it in place basically. Now the size will actually just control the size of this, as you can see. Okay, so I think leaving it at 10 is going to be pretty good. And you can just keep playing around with these settings until you get the desired look. Maybe we can use the bloom intensity at 0.2 around. There we go. And for the size, I don't want to burn the image. Let's just keep it at 20 around. So you can see the difference between having a bloom and glare effect on and off. It gives a little bit of life to my scene. Okay, so let's collapse bloom and glare, and sharpening and blurring will do what it says. It will sharpen up my image. The sharpen amount, I also like to keep it at 3. 3 is the magic number in this case. And if we go a little bit further than 5, you can see that my image starts to get a bit noisy. So leaving it at 3 or 4 probably will be something good. Okay, so we haven't added a denoising to this, but we're going to be looking at this later on. Okay, so I think this is looking really great. In the next lecture, we're just going to add a background. Thanks for listening. I'll see you there.